Hey, welcome back to the show. We've got some terrible news. Sarah Beckstrom, one of the guardsmen that was shot in D.C., has just died. Listen to President Trump make the announcement last night.
I must unfortunately tell you that just seconds before I went on, right now, I heard that Sarah Beckstrom of West Virginia, one of the guardsmen that we're talking about, highly respected, young, magnificent person, started service in June of 2023, outstanding in every way. She's just passed away. She's no longer with us. She's looking down at us right now. Her parents are with her. It's just happened. She was savagely attacked. She's dead. She's not with us. Incredible person. Outstanding in every single way, in every department. That's horrible.
You know, this whole thing was unfortunate. Our thoughts and prayers go out to her family and to Andrew Wolf, who's still currently in critical condition. And now we're finding out more about the shooter and the connections that he had to the U.S. government. Listen here.
National security reporter Zach Cohen joins us now. Zach, take us through what we've learned about the suspect.
Yeah, we're learning quite a lot about his background. It's a 29-year-old Afghan national who came to the United States in 2021 as part of this program that was implemented by the Biden administration after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, it seems that why he was allowed to come to the U.S. in part was because of his work with the U.S. military and CIA. He was, our understanding, he served in an elite counterterrorism unit that worked directly with U.S. intelligence and military units in Afghanistan, including active combat against Taliban forces at the time. And so there were thousands of those individuals who served in those roles that were evacuated when the Taliban started to rise to power after the U.S. left. And it appears that was the basis for his immigration into the United States.
Now, I know there are a lot of reports out there about the vetting process when it comes to people that come from places like Afghanistan. But the process of vetting is lengthy. There's biometric vetting, there's family background, and when we talk about family background, it is a very detailed background. Now, the question is, was this vetting completely done on this individual? That's something that I think the Trump administration is going to look into, because this whole process was started under the Biden administration, but it was finalized and finally approved under the Trump administration. Now, leave it up to the media to make a spectacle of the biggest tragedies. The media is now saying that she should have never been there. If President Trump hadn't activated the guard, then she would have been at home with her family. The whole thing is ridiculous. The troops know exactly what they're getting into when they swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States. But that does not prevent the left-wing media from blaming President Trump for this death as well. Listen here.
It's the uniform is politics extended into the public space.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, two West Virginia National Guard soldiers who had nothing to do with this person, that they did not ask to be deployed in this way, and their military members, by and large, want to be left out of the politics.
Yeah.
But here they are, and representing, with the American flag on their shoulder, representing politics.
They're heroes, but there's families that's going to be, those two families are going to be sitting at home saying, should they have been there in the first place?
Indeed.
That's a question that we have to bring up.
Now, did you see how uncomfortable she was when she was making her point? Why do you think that is? Because she knows she's absolutely wrong. The commander-in-chief gave an order. The troops were deployed. As a matter of fact, Sarah volunteered to stay longer past her tour of duty. She volunteered to stay there. So when it comes to them saying, well, maybe they didn't want to be there, or maybe the troops didn't belong there, they wanted to be there. As a matter of fact, she extended to stay there because she enjoyed what she was doing. But unfortunately, that's not going to stop the left-wing media from stating that there is an underlying goal for the deployment of these national troops into the most violent cities in the United States of America. Listen here.
What the president is doing through the Secretary of Defense is creating units, official military units, to, quite frankly, watch the American people. And that's the thing that is absolutely abhorrent. It reminds me so much of what happened in Germany in the 1930s.
It makes me incredibly nervous that we're about to see people in law enforcement, people in uniform military get nervous, get stressed, shoot at American civilians. It is a very, very stressful situation for these law enforcement and for the communities on the ground.
It's an attack on the American people by the President of the United States. Now, he may disagree with a state that didn't vote for him, but Should he be sending troops in? No.
You said he has other aims. What are the other aims?
The other aims are that he'd like to stop the elections in 2026 or, frankly, take control of those elections.
I can't believe that these people and these politicians say all this nonsense with a straight face. So the Secretary of War is sending the troops into America's streets to spy on Americans. Let me tell you, those troops are not thinking about spying on anybody when they're in the streets. They're thinking about completing their mission. And their mission is public security. Governor Pritzker is crazy. He's talking about the president stealing the election. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like what President Trump was saying previously. And when he was saying it, people were outraged. How come people aren't outraged now? This is absolutely absurd. These National Guardsmen are in the streets in the most violent cities to protect Americans. And that is it. Now, here's President Trump's take on what happened to the gunman and why he did what he did.
He went cuckoo. I mean, he went nuts. And that happens, too. It happens too often with these people. You see them. But look, this is how they come in. This is how they're standing on top of each other. And that's an airplane. There was no vetting or anything. They came in unvetted. And we have a lot of others in this country. We're going to get them out. But they go cuckoo. Something happens to them.
I can tell you right now, Americans are not angry about this. Americans want to be safe in this country. They want to be safe. What better way to ensure our safety than to ensure that that vetting process is good, that the vetting process is detailed, that they are catching anybody that comes into this country that is looking to do us harm. Americans are not mad at this. Look, the unfortunate part about this whole thing is that there are a lot of people that come into this country illegally. Yes, it's completely wrong. You should not come into this country illegally. But the majority of people that come here for a better life. They come here to work and send money back to their families. These people that are doing these types of things are making everything worse for everybody else that's here trying to make a living. Because anytime something like this happens, the president is going to come down hard on immigration. He's just going to harden the policies. One of the groups that's made it particularly difficult for a lot of other people are the Somalis. And if you're not familiar with the case of the Somalis and what they were doing and how they were stealing billions from American taxpayers, take a look at this.
A massive fraud scheme uncovered in Minnesota found money intended for social services has been allegedly siphoned indirectly into the pockets of the Somali terrorist group Al-Shabaab. Somali immigrants in Minnesota have reportedly been abusing systems meant to help the most unfortunate among us, including the latest federally funded autism services. The autism fraud scheme reportedly amassed $14 million through Medicare claims for services that were never provided, involving kids who never had autism. And the Somali immigrants behind this web of schemes have allegedly stolen billions from taxpayers, much of the money going back to the Somali government, where it would then end up in the hands of terrorists.
But people who are all in on immigration, whether it's unvetted, whether it is what it is, are going to argue, and they're going to say a lot of this fraud is not taking place. You know, these are stories that are made up by the Trump administration in order to limit people coming to this country. I can tell you right now, with what we learned from Doge, we know that fraud is massive when it comes to a lot of this money that's going overseas. And we need to get a hold of that, because a lot of that money could be used in this country to help Americans who are struggling right now. But people from the Somali community are going to argue that there is no funding of terrorism, that their money is not going to fund any type of terrorist activity. Listen to this right here.
This story has no legs, unfortunately, but it is an attack.
Jilani Hussein, a Somali American leading the nonprofit Care Minnesota, calls it an Islamophobic smear campaign. He points to findings like this one on a similar issue from 2019, with the Minnesota Office of the Legislative Auditor unable to substantiate the allegation that Minnesotans sent money stolen from a state child care program to a foreign terrorist organization. The report acknowledging it was possible, but they didn't find any evidence. Do you have any reason to believe that there's any truth to this idea that dollars are flowing from Minnesota to this terrorist organization?
Absolutely not, because one of the things that's a lot easier to track is money.
You know one thing Mr. Hussein didn't say? He didn't say, listen, this fraud is not happening. It's not happening. This is something that's made up. What he said was that the money wasn't going to terrorists. But he never mentioned or defended the fact that this money is going overseas through fraud that's being committed against the people of Minnesota. He didn't defend that, and he didn't deny it either. So what we need to understand is not just that the money is going to fund terrorists, but the fact that the money is being swindled and stolen. That's the big story. You know, he makes a point about money being tracked, that it's easy to track money. No, it's not. Once this money goes overseas, the money's gone. there is no tracking that money, especially if it's being given to terrorists. So let's move on to our next story, which is Venezuela. Maduro continues to do everything that he can to dissuade the president from taking action against him and the military in the country. As a matter of fact, he just tried to do what the United States did with Trinidad and Tobago, which was engage in military drills to show exactly what we can do against Venezuela if action ever took place. Take a look at the Venezuelan military engaging in some of their drills and displays amongst the Venezuelan people. You know, one of the things that's funny about those clips that I showed you is that in the back of one of those armored vehicles, it says Independencia o nada. That means independence or nothing. How about independence for the Venezuelan people? How about freedom from tyranny? So I just find that completely ironic that it says that in the back of one of those armored vehicles. You know, one of the reasons I like seeing these military videos coming out of Venezuela is because they give us an opportunity to take a look at their firepower. Now take a look at this video right here where some military service members in Venezuela are shooting. How old do these people look? These people should be pensioned already. I can't believe that they put these videos out showing these people. These people should not be fighting. These people should not be holding a weapon at this point. They should be at some retirement home somewhere. But Venezuela continues to put them out, thinking that these are going to make America shake in its boots. Maduro needs to do himself a favor and just stop putting these videos out. But as Venezuela continues to put out these videos showing their military might, if you want to call it that, the United States continues to make moves. The Secretary of War was just in the Dominican Republic, where they are planning on setting up a temporary base with a bunch of military assets so they can use it as a springboard for counter-narcotic operations in the ocean.
That we have authorized the United States for a limited time to use restricted areas at the San Isidro Air Base and Las Americas International Airport for logistical operations such as aircraft refueling and the transport of equipment and technical personnel. The purpose is clear: to strengthen the air and maritime protection ring maintained by our armed forces, a crucial effort to prevent the entry of narcotics and to strike a more decisive blow against transnational organized crime.
What is a temporary deployment of U.S. service members and aircraft conducting Operation Southern Spear. Small footprint, temporary, fully respecting your sovereignty and your laws and all the dynamics here in the Dominican Republic. It's a great partnership that we're, and truly a joint effort between our two countries against narco trafficking and narco terrorism. I think the President of the United States, President Trump, has designated these as foreign terrorist organizations, designated terrorist organizations, narco traffickers, hell-bent on bringing violence and drugs to countries in the region and to the American people. And I want those watching who see the narco-terrorist drug boats blowing up to understand that we're deadly serious about this mission.
I think this is a brilliant move by the Secretary of War to place assets in the Dominican Republic. You know, that last part that the Secretary of War stated about how serious the United States was when it comes to thwarting the drugs that are coming from the Caribbean into the United States, that was not just aimed at Venezuela. That was aimed at a lot of these Caribbean countries that are used as hubs for drugs that are pushed to the United States and Europe. I had the opportunity to work in the Dominican Republic as a desk officer or a representative for the United States in the Dominican Republic when it came to counter-narcotic operations and interdiction operations, when it came to those drugs that are being pushed into the United States. And the Dominican Republic has a tremendous capability of helping the United States when it comes to stopping a lot of the drugs that are flowing in. So I think this is a great move by the Secretary of War. So the United States continues to bolster its military prepositioning assets in the Caribbean. And even worse news for Maduro is the fact that President Trump just announced that military action on the ground in Venezuela will start soon.
President Donald Trump says the United States will strike inside Venezuela, quote, very soon. He made the statement while speaking to members of the U.S. military on a Thanksgiving phone call. Have a listen.
And in recent weeks, you've been working to deter Venezuelan drug traffickers, of which there are many. Of course, there aren't too many coming in by sea anymore, have you probably noticed that? We'll be starting to stop them by land also. The land is easier. But that's going to start very soon. We warned them. Stop sending poison to our country.
The US has killed more than 80 people in strikes on alleged drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean. The administration has offered no proof that the vessels were actually carrying drugs.
Now remember, the Trump administration has stated that there has been an 85% reduction in drugs coming in through the waterways into the United States. So these drug interdiction operations are working. Blowing up these drug boats is working. Now, I left that part in the end there for a specific reason. In the news, CNN says that there's no proof. I'll reiterate what I always say. We do not need to show proof to the media. Sometimes revealing the proof or showing the proof will reveal your assets. In intelligence, you can't do that. In the intelligence community, anybody will tell you that that is a no-no, that we cannot do that. Almost 90% of Democrats don't think they're getting enough information. But at the same time, about 70%, if not more, of Republicans don't think they're getting enough information. So they need to do a better job of showing Americans why we are doing the things we are doing in Venezuela. And if we don't do that, if we don't show the American people why these actions are necessary, it's not only the media, it's not only the left-wing politicians that are going to push against all the actions that we're taking right now, but it's people in TV in general. Listen to The View talk about this right now and the misinformation that they're putting out there.
Carrying out military strikes on boats in the Caribbean without congressional approval. That's an illegal order.
Yeah.
As you say, shooting protesters in the legs, as Mark Esper said.
Seems like an obvious
that would be. But I think we have to be careful in
activity.
conflating those, though.
Well, these are things that could be potentially construed as illegal orders, using our major our major American cities as training grounds for the military.
You know, I think she's completely wrong. She's completely wrong. None of the actions that President Trump is taking in Venezuela right now are illegal. If they would have been, do you really think that the Democrats would just be sitting around and letting them happen? They understand that all these actions are legal. President Trump is not looking to declare war on Venezuela, so congressional approval is not needed. How many presidents have taken actions before without congressional approval? How many strikes did President Obama conduct without congressional approval? He's got the record for it, but they're not talking about that. One of the things that I think we need to discuss is the elephant in the room, which is, what is the real underlying reason that the United States is taking action in Venezuela? I'm not going to say that it is the reason. I'm going to say it's one of the reasons. It's a 2-for-1. We understand, and I've never shied away from saying this, we understand the difference that having access to Venezuela's petroleum, their oil, is going to have on our economy. I discussed this on the last episode. The effect that having access to Venezuela's oil will have on this economy is tremendous. So in reality, it is a 2-for-1. We're going to help the Venezuelans liberate their country and finally be a democratic nation. But at the same time, there's always something that the United States is going to get in return. Remember, President Trump is transactional. His first question is, what's in it for us? And the Venezuelans are okay with that because in the end, they understand that it's going to be freedom for their nation. But you know who also understands that? President Petro from Colombia. Here he is discussing that.
And if it is about drugs, do you think that Colombia could be at risk here?
No, lo que está detrás es lo mismo que está detrás de la guerra de Ucrania.
¿Qué es? Which
Petróleo.
is?
Petróleo.
Que los americanos van atrás del petróleo. Americans are chasing
y tiene
oil.
que ver con todo lo que he hablado en esta reunión, que a veces tú pues, la coges como un tema ajeno, pero está en el centro de las circunstancias. Entonces se llama petróleo. Colombia no. Venezuela tiene una de las mayores o la mayor reserva del mundo en petróleo hasta ahora pesado. Ojo con esa definición. Y en Ucrania hay reservas. Y en general todas las guerras de este siglo han tenido que ver con el petróleo.
We know President Trump is transactional. You're saying he's going after Venezuela's oil. If that is the case, do you think the United States will strike inside of Venezuela?
Van a conseguir el petróleo casi gratuito.
President Trump will not be investing millions, tens of millions, eventually billions of dollars into pre-positioning forces not only around Venezuela, but all over the Caribbean without there being a return on investment in ROI. President Trump doesn't work like that. He understands the impact that having access to Venezuelan oil is going to have on the United States of America. And that is the reason he is so interested in Venezuela, in addition to freeing the Venezuelan people from tyranny and freeing the Venezuelan people from the death and destruction of Maduro. But here is the very interesting part. President Petro is asked, is Maduro a narco trafficker? Is he connected to El Cartel de los Soles? And what is his answer? Listen here.
Is Maduro a narco-trafficker? Is he a drug lord? Is he a dictator? And should he be allowed to get on a plane without facing any of the human rights consequences?
El problema de Maduro se llama democracia. Yo lo reconozco así.
Falta de democracia.
Falta de democracia y de diálogo.
Pero you don't see him as a head of a cartel de los soles?
Ninguna investigación colombiana que es independiente del presidente y en años en que yo no he sido presidente.
Pero no lo veo como el jefe del narcotráfico. You don't see him as a head.
Nos muestra una relación del narcotráfico colombiano con Maduro. Nos muestra 2 oficiales de alto rango del ejército venezolano ligados al narcotráfico. Pero aquí hemos tenido como 10 que también los hemos investigado.
So should Maduro be allowed to get on a plane without facing any of the consequences?
Debería y ser juzgado, investigado como cualquiera de nosotros, pero hasta ahora, en los datos colombianos, no en los de los Estados Unidos, que no conozco, en los datos jurídicos colombianos no aparece algo que se llama cartel de los soles.
So President Petro is saying that El Cartel de los Soles does not exist. He's out of his mind. Remember, 60% increase in cocaine production in his country during his first year. One of the reasons Petro is talking about this publicly now is because he knows that there's going to be a ton of pressure put on him once the Trump administration has a lot of influence in Venezuela after they oust Maduro. He knows that the pressure is going to be intense. That's going to be placed not only on his government, but on him personally. He's going to have no option but to break ties with the cartels and ensure that that drug production in his country is eliminated. Okay, that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed these stories. If you did, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay balanced.